Hey, welcome back to the Vikings Playbook. I'm your host, Steve Hoikkala. We got a great show for you today and some great topics to talk about as well, too. So I have with me today, and I'll introduce him here in a second, but Dustin Baker, Vikings territory. The topics we're going to talk about today are we're going to touch on Justin Jefferson, some of the Super Bowl comments that he had with some of the interviews during Media Week. JJ McCarthy, of course, and some of the Super Bowl heat he's been taking, some of the more recent Kwesi Adofo-Mensah rumors that we've also heard. And then, of course, we're going to take a look at the NFL draft and just kind of a sneak peek into what the Minnesota Vikings might do at pick 18. But if you're not already, make sure that you're following us on X. So X at Vikings Playbook and at Vikes Playbook on YouTube. And then you can just go ahead and put us in the search bar, Vikings Playbook, to get us on Facebook, Instagram, and then, of course, TikTok. So make sure that you're supporting us, following us, subscribe, and set your alerts so you're not missing any podcasts from Vikings Playbook. And then also something pretty cool, if you didn't know already, I also write for purpleptsd.com. So if you have the opportunity and you want to check out what we're doing, again, purpleptsd.com. Check out more Vikings news daily, not just from myself, but some of our other writers that we have over there at Purple PTSD that are writing on your favorite team, the Minnesota Vikings. So, with that, let me introduce Dustin Baker from Vikings Territory. He is an editor over there, and you can follow him on social media at Dust Baker. And then on X, you can also follow Viking Territory. So it's Vikings Territory, but on X, it's Viking without the S, Viking Territory. And then, of course, the website, they're our sister website, actually, for Purple PTSD. So vikingsterritory.com. You can get to either website from there as well. And then, if you didn't know, Dustin Baker is also an author, and he's wrote a book called The Motor Route, and you can get that for $14.99 on Amazon. Go ahead and check it out, and with no further ado, let me go ahead and welcome on to the stage Dustin Baker. Dustin, how we doing?
Not bad, sir. This is my first correspondence with the general public since Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's termination. So you'll get some of my fresh takes on here. Thanks for the kind intro. I also have my second book coming out in about 2 weeks. It's called The Invaders, and it'll be on Amazon as well. But I am anxious to talk about these Vikings because we had that bombshell dropped on us out of nowhere because it felt like it should have happened, the termination, if at all, 3.5 weeks ago. And here we are.
Absolutely. And those are one of the topics that we'll get to. I have that a little bit tucked away towards the end, which we'll touch on that right before we get into draft talk. So our very first thing I want to touch on, though, is some of the comments that we saw from Justin Jefferson. So Media Row, you're getting a lot of players that are in the Super Bowl, not in the Super Bowl, and media is really just, of course, been hammering on the Vikings in our quarterback situation. And that didn't get any different as far as some of the comments that Justin Jefferson had in regards to those questions that he fielded on our quarterback situation. So I'm going to go ahead and just play one snippet. There's several different snippets, but this is just one quick one on some of the comments he had.
Like your team is missing now?
That's a great question. That's another great question. I don't know.
Full of them today.
I don't have the answer to that question.
Yeah.
It's just like I said, it's a lot of pieces that go into the puzzle that you kind of got to slowly just put, one by one. But obviously, the quarterback is the main question everybody is asking, and the question that, they've been asking all season. But obviously, JJ's first year, not really being able to, play for his first year, he got injured. So, people just need to give him a little bit of patience and have a little bit of patience for him. And it's a process that he need to go through. He need to learn this game. He need to learn, playing with the best receiver in the game. He need to learn just how to manage that offense. And it comes with time. It comes with just preparation. And, starting in the offseason now, just getting him right and groomed to, where we want to be at.
Now, he did several different interviews. He did another one with Up and Adams to where he specifically, she pushed him on what do you want to see at the quarterback position? Who do you want to see throwing you the ball? And the way that he broached that topic, as far as, he didn't lie. He kept it factual. Where do you need to improve? He said it was the quarterback position. Who do you want to see throwing the ball? And so he made different comments, in regards to this. And, basically what he said is, we could have had, different quarterbacks. We could have had Sam back, and obviously, why not sign him and bring him back? So he talked about that, and we had, Daniel Jones. He talked about that as well. And then at the same time, he said, but right now, JJ McCarthy is our quarterback, and our focus is trying to get him better and improve our chemistry. He talked about that piece. And sorry, I'm going to throw it over to you, Dustin, but I also want to mention, any of you guys out there, if you have questions or comments for Dustin and I, please make sure that you put them in the comments on either X or YouTube, and we'll get to you absolutely on live and try to answer those best we can. But Dustin, with what you just saw and some of the other clips that you've seen on social media, what's your take on how Justin answered?
My very first reaction when I saw him with these interviews was, this guy has had to answer the same question 3 off seasons in a row. In 2023 off season, it's, do you think Kirk will be back? If not, then what? And he always says the same thing. I don't run that part of the team. I catch the ball. I'm going to cook with whoever's out there. So I give him a lot of kudos for being the literal team player. And you could tell this time, that he still believes in McCarthy. But then there's, I think, team-wide apprehension as to, do we really have to let Darnold go? I still don't fault the Vikings for the process of rolling with their guy that they drafted who tore his meniscus. Like, that isn't an absolutely devastating injury. So I still maintain that the Vikings weren't outlandishly wrong for what they did. It's just that we had no way of knowing that McCarthy, who was healthy in high school, healthy in college, is all of a sudden injury prone. What I fear the most right now is Justin Jefferson's going to be 27 in June. If we dink around and screw up this offseason quarterback decision making, probably would lead to Kevin O'Connell's termination. Like, if they don't reach the postseason or they play horribly, he's either going to get disgruntled or we're going to waste another year of his prime. So when you heard both Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell about 3 weeks ago talk about their priority this offseason is having the deepest quarterback room possible, I believe it. I mean, they've never said that before. Like, they made it sound like it was so obvious. Like, well, yeah, we're going to have a deep quarterback room. Like, well, you didn't do that last year. You waited until the draft to trade for Sam Howell. So I love that Jefferson has the perfect non-diva attitude about this whole thing. But I worry that if we don't nail this decision, whether it's rolling with McCarthy, trading for Kyler Murray, or signing Malik Willis, or giving the Cousins thing another reunion angle, I worry that we're going to piss him off finally, and he's want to leave next offseason, when it would be easier in theory to trade him if he wanted out, or just flat out, let's say he just stays forever. He's a great guy. We're going to look up and be like, hey, we finally got our quarterback. And by the way, Jefferson's 30, and we've wasted those 3 years. Those are my main takeaways from his appearance at Radio Row on the Super Bowl. It's really cool that he's a stand-up guy.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't ask for a better leader, on this team and superstar. The way that he's kept his composure, he's tried to be patient with a young rookie quarterback, even though that he's visibly frustrated. He's still handling himself well as far as the team goes. But yes, you can see that, maybe his patience is just in the way that he's answering some of these questions. I think he's also telegraphing a little bit to the team, we need to get that position right. Like he actually said, is, no matter, he doesn't care who's throwing him the football as long as they're throwing the football, to him. And basically what he's saying is, I don't care who it is, but we got to get it right. So that's really the thing. And I don't think that there was anything wrong with what he said. He kept it 100%. And I think that's all we can ask. I mean, it's totally okay to answer that question. And I think JJ McCarthy, looking in that interview, he's probably going to be real with himself too and be like, that's fair. I need to be better. Now, with the topics that we'll be talking about, and we'll get a little bit farther into that, but it begs the question, like you said, we have to get that position right. So is that JJ McCarthy? So that let's go on to topic number 2. JJ McCarthy. Can he overcome the narrative? Just real quick, in our comments, Brevin Bain, who also over at Purple PTSD, and I think does a little bit for you guys as well too. He says, "What's up, boys?" He also does a Vikes Now podcast. So Brevin Bain, shout out to you. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. 6-Year Nation, hey, welcome on as well. Appreciate you joining and tuning in. So JJ McCarthy, we know about the 9, the meme. Anything bad that happens, JJ McCarthy's face appears in a meme, right? So that's the thing. So he's got all kinds of social media hate going on right now, and he's catching strays left and right at the Super Bowl media row right now. So can he overcome basically what he's being cast upon as already being a bust? So you've seen some things out there where people are already claiming that he is a bust. Now, yes, there are some injury issues. Yes, he had some long stretches in there of games. And when we say long, it's hard to really even say long stretches, but much of the season and as a whole, didn't play well. Didn't stay healthy. But weeks 14 through 16, after we simplified, we saw the trajectory of JJ McCarthy of what that could be. And, so that begs the question going into the offseason. Justin Jefferson has already said that he's going to get with JJ McCarthy and work on their chemistry and continue to work with him, so he can get better. Kevin O'Connell maybe has figured out that maybe I don't have to try to make JJ McCarthy into what he is not. So working on what he does well now in this offseason and having a different focus coming into next season. Can he continue that trajectory and become a real good quarterback for this team? We don't know until you play him. So can he overcome that narrative? That's the first question I'll ask you first.
Yes, he can, but his path to do so became very complicated when the guy who drafted him got fired last week.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the Vikings will never come out and say, we are pivoting away from JJ McCarthy. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah drafted that guy. But through their actions, they could trade for Kyler Murray tomorrow. They could sign Kirk Cousins or Malik Willis, especially like Malik Willis or somebody who still has the youth to have a long career. Right. They could sign somebody in free agency to compete against McCarthy this summer. And through their actions, the Vikings would basically be saying McCarthy was a Kwesi guy. And, we went and traded for Kyler Murray, or we got Mac Jones for second round or however much he would cost. So I know in my heart of hearts that McCarthy can even it out and be good, but I worry about him right now because Kevin O'Connell, as the de facto CEO of the Minnesota Vikings, I think he has to win. Like, it's really, really rare for a head coach to go into his 5th season with no playoff wins. And he's going to do it. But I think he's going to know the heat is on him because he's basically in charge of personnel, or at least offensive personnel. He's the head coach. Right. So if I was the general manager of the Vikings, I would probably ride it out with McCarthy until it was too obvious that he wasn't going to be the long-term solution. McCarthy as the fix is always the most straightforward, easiest thing right now. If you lean into the games where he looked fantastic against the Commanders, Cowboys, and most of the Giants game, he looked like a Pro Bowler in those games. The problem is against the Falcons and Packers, it looked like utter shit. And when you finish the season, he ranked 32nd for EPA CPOE, very dead last. So you're facing a guy who's missed 70% of all Vikings games since being drafted, and he was the dead last in performance. That usually indicates a bust is on the way. But I will remain optimistic that this is the outlier. You will hope that he was like a Jared Goff, who started his career really slow and then eventually got better and now is arguably a top 12 guy. So I do think there is a path for McCarthy, and I don't care about the memes. Any professional, either celebrity or athlete who's going to be famous now, you got to be prepared that when you're not hitting it, you're going to be a part of the meme culture. So I don't care about that. Hopefully he doesn't care about that either.
Right.
The thing I love about him is his drive, his desire to be good. He's not an aloof prick. Like, he's not like Jamarcus Russell. It's not like we have to worry about, does he even care about football? I know that he wants to be good. I think my biggest fear right now is we're sitting here on the Saturday night before the Super Bowl. We have to watch 4 hours of Sam Darnold tomorrow. My worst fear is we let McCarthy go too early, and then he goes to the Rams after Stafford retired, and boom, he's the Rams guy for the next 12 years. So I would not give up on him just yet, but I expect the Vikings to operate as if it's going to be a quarterback competition at the very least. And I personally think the Kyler Murray trade is very much alive, especially if you can get Murray for a second or a third rounder.
And I think that's some of the biggest question as we're going to get into our next topic here too. But you know, is KOC, and how hot is his seat? I've written about that, and we talked about it on our podcast last week. I do think he's on a hot seat. Kwesi's was hotter. I don't think we can let KOC off the hook, and Kwesi can't just be the fall guy, if you will. He had a hand in drafting, in the development of JJ McCarthy as well too. And even maybe mishandling that or misreading how far along he was. So play calling, development, all that stuff. I think KOC has some accountability there as well. So as we get into this next season, you're right. It's too early to cast off JJ McCarthy, but so what kind of quarterback are they going to bring in? Are they going to bring in somebody that we can win with now? Will appease Justin Jefferson as McCarthy maybe needs more time sitting behind a quarterback? Is that the question? Is that the route that they go? Is that the route that even Kevin O'Connell feels he needs to go to save his job? And that's something to take in consideration as well too. But what I'd like to see, because there's not great options out there. There's not the Joe Burrow. That's not happening. Could it next year if the Bengals bungle the situation that they have and they don't make the acquisitions needed to help him? Yeah, that could be a thing. But for 26, it's not happening. It's not possible. So let's stick with what is realistic. You talked about Kyler Murray being an option. That could happen. Mac Jones, we're hearing reports that the 49ers might want to keep him or whatever too. Could happen. But you're giving a pick away in order to do it. So, and if you're going to trade a second round pick, you're almost committing, especially to like a Kyler Murray, because there's a contract that comes with that. He doesn't want to come here to sit behind JJ McCarthy. So there's going to be a contract in place. Exactly.
He wouldn't either.
Exactly. So there's going to be a contract in place, and you traded a high draft pick. I think you're kind of almost moving on from JJ McCarthy if you bring in a Kyler Murray.
The thing that I wonder about the timing of Kwesi's termination, and like I've absolutely put accountability in Kevin O'Connell with JJ McCarthy, but the thing that I wonder is there a world where Kevin O'Connell went to Kwesi and said, franchise this Darnold guy or do what you can? The guy just threw 35 touchdowns for us, and Kwesi was like, "Nah, I got you, McCarthy." And then, in the 2024 draft, if KOC was the one who identified Drake May, and then he turned out not to be for sale. And then after, we got through both of those, if Kevin O'Connell was the driver for Aaron Rodgers, and if he was told no every step of the way, which is just, a random theory, then it would make sense where the Wilfs would have said, good Lord, we had 3 quarterback options that we thought were going to work. And the guy who was the driver of all of them was the coach, and the guy who said no was the general manager. That's the only thing that makes me wonder about the timing. Like, did it all come to a head when Darnold got to the Super Bowl? That's what I wonder.
Yeah, and with these Kwesi rumors, because we're getting into topic 3 here, like I said, we can't let KOC off the hook. But one last thought on the JJ McCarthy, what I'd like to see, just because there aren't a whole lot of great options out there, unless we're going to give up draft picks. And there's a lot of teams that don't want to let go of, their franchise quarterback. Let's face it, that's just not going to happen. And we're drafting 18. So there's not realistic situations as far as moving off of JJ McCarthy, unless we're willing to trade a draft pick and maybe move on for like a Kyler Murray, or to move on to a Mac Jones type situation. But if you ask yourself, this team's a Mac Jones away, Are you really willing to give up a second round pick and sign him to a, probably a 2-3 year contract uh, type thing? I don't think I'm ready to do that. And what I'd love
With
to see is, you see stuff like this, on here, and, the the don't come back player of the year. I'd love to see JJ McCarthy this next year if he ends up being our starter, which right now is likely because he's our number one quarterback on our team right now. I'd love to see him come back and really make some of these individuals eat their words. I'd love to see that happen for the young kid. I'd love to see him grow, develop, and, and then we win too by having a good quarterback that we developed. It helps us cap wise, proving them right, all that good stuff. I'd love to see that happen. It may not. Diana Rossini comes out with, and you see some of the interviews where we could see Kirk O'Chains back in Minnesota, and some people may not like that, but the situation, let's just say KOC thinks he needs to sit a year. That could be a situation where Kirk thinks, hey, I can try to revive my career, come back and play a year. And if I play good enough, maybe let's see what happens. That could be a situation that's on there. There's going to be all kinds of rumors this year, but if the Falcons do release him, yeah, it does become a possibility, and would I rather have Kirk Cousins than Mac Jones? Probably, because he's familiar with the system. He's familiar with the players. He has the chemistry. And he doesn't cost me a draft pick, and he's old enough to
basically
where I
cost
don't
you
have
nothing.
to I don't have to make a long-term commitment to him. So that is something to think about going into this as well too.
On Kyler Murray, the reason that I think that one is realistic is if you look around the landscape of the league of what teams that need quarterbacks, it's the Raiders. They're going to draft Fernando Mendoza, arguably the Browns, but they, still have an $80 million cap hit for Deshaun Watson coming up, so they might be stuck with what they got or a draft pick. The Cardinals, but they're not going to keep Murray. And then it's kind of a 3-horse race after that. It would be the Jets, the Steelers, and the Vikings. And Aaron Rodgers could very easily sign back with Mike McCarthy and friends. And then it'd be kind of a binary choice if the Vikings want Kyler Murray between the Jets and the Vikings. And I think, Kyler Murray grew up as a Vikings fan. He said that a couple times. He came up during the Adrian Peterson era. And I think Kyler Murray would choose the Vikings over the Jets, if he could dictate where he wanted to go. And you'd get a guy on him where the only real knock on his physical traits is his height. He's got the arm strength. He's got the mobility, certainly got the speed. He's the 5th most accurate passer in NFL history, believe it or not. So I know that we may not be Mac Jones away from being a Super Bowl contender, but in the best case scenario with Kyler, the first overall pick from the 2019 NFL draft, I don't think that, even though fans do not like Kyler Murray, I've learned that over the last month. I think the skill set there with Kyler Murray could inflate your ceiling to get you really excited once you warmed up to the idea.
Absolutely. And Norsefius, that was sarcasm from both Dustin and I. We're not a Mac Jones away. And and that's the thing of it. He's not a good enough quarterback to ascend us to that level. Yeah. So definitely sarcasm on.
We also didn't think Darnold was that for us, and then he's there with the Seahawks. So
that is true. That is true. But you don't know what you have in Mac, and you're going to have to give up a pick. With Darnold, we weren't giving up a 2nd round pick to get him when we brought him over either. So there's a lot more invested if you're going to do something like that with a Mac Jones. Bob Swede, thanks for joining us live. Definitely appreciate that as well. Some other Kwesi rumors, and I just want to kind of get your thoughts on some of these. I thought, for sure this first one was ridiculous, talking about how people all around the league and other GMs were frowning upon him taking time off for his child's birth 2 weeks during training camp. And that happened not this last season, but the previous season. And, we didn't hear anything about it now, but now we're hearing about it like it was a problem, and, that, hey, that's not the culture type of thing. For being a present dad, I'm not going to fault him for a 2-week thing where he can communicate. I just think that, piling on a guy like this too, I think I heard some other people, that's just not it, and this isn't, what he got fired for.
No, not at all. Like that was actually comical. Like it's fair to say that it was unusual for him to take paternity leave in the NFL. Like that's fine, but then for it to be construed as a smoking gun for his
Yeah.
termination never made much sense. It's like I don't know. I'm trying, like, if you work retail, like Christmas or Black Friday, that is your Super Bowl. If there was a store manager of a Target who was like, you know what, I'm going on vacation on Black Friday, other retail like persons would be like, God, that's weird that Betsy did that around Black Friday. So there are certain norms in professions, and I think in
Yep.
professional football, it's that dudes don't do paternity leave. Well, this dude wanted to be a little bit different. I think the Vikings even like supported it at the time.
Mhm.
So the idea that this came back to bite him in the ass 2 or 3 years later is ridiculous. But based on Kwesi's draft record alone, I'll tell you a little story. After the Seattle game, when it turned out that Max Prosmer looked like an utter buffoon, I wrote an article on VikingsTerritory.com that was titled "The Vikings Need a New General Manager," and it laid out the case for all of the draft misses and then the strange trades of Harrison Phillips, Mekhi Blackman, like a fourth rounder for Adam Thielen. And apparently, like at the time, that McCarthy was trending in the wrong direction. Like we have become so subconsciously resigned to our fate during Vikings drafts, like leading up to a draft. You just kind of feel like, well, we're not going to get any good players anyway. So hopefully free agency goes well. That is a deadly way to think of as fans or about you and me who write about the team, because the draft is the only free place in football, only place in football to get free players. And Kwesi had 4 drafts. You have 7 picks in every draft. That's an eligible 28 picks. He has 5 guys that you can say he did pretty good there. And that's including Jalen Naylor, who is like decent for a WR3. So if you are at a success rate, a hit rate in the draft of about 18%, which is what 5 divided by 28 is, your team is not going to have sustainability. That's why we look down at the roster right now and it kind of feels old, because we've had to use free agency to supplement the draft misses. And when you are just getting done with a competitive rebuild, which I think we did, and now we were supposed to have the Super Bowl window open, you're supposed to have this glorious young roster that keeps, the bulk of the guys are going to be 25 next year, 26 the year after that.
Right.
Instead, our dudes are like, all right, he's going to be 29. Aaron Jones is 32. And the reason that it's like that is because Kwesi's draft record was so bad.
That we have to go
In
out
his
to free
defense,
agency.
in his defense, it started to get a little bit better, but that means that we get excited that Donovan Jackson didn't suck. That's what we considered a good draft. And I think ultimately the draft record did him in, and the optics of the Sam Darnold Super Bowl visit had to have something to do with it to explain it being belated by 3.5 weeks.
Absolutely, and the fact that we sent him down to the Senior Bowl, a weird timing with that. I don't think that the Wills were sold on firing him until that press conference after the fact, after the Senior Bowl. Sam's going to be in the Super Bowl, and you kind of have the admittance from Kwesi of, I might have messed that one up. And I think that was probably the final straw. Brebman Bain, Vikes Now, says, I looked through Kyle's trade tracker for Kwesi. Legit didn't win a single trade, in my opinion. Trading might have been worse than the draft.
He won one, but it was because the Lions didn't do shit. The Hawkinson trade, the Vikings won that, but that's because the Lions turned their draft haul into Hendon Hooker, some defensive tackle who's no longer on the team. Like that was really the only claim to fame. Based on the initial haul, it was like a crapshoot. But the Lions didn't do anything at all with what they took away from the Hawkinson trade.
Well, now that we're talking about draft, let's go ahead and jump into topic number 4. So you're going to have Rob Brzezinski, as your interim GM through the draft. And obviously, KOC is going to have a big part to play and a big voice in this year's draft. So we're drafting at pick 18. Here's some different mock drafts, and this is who NFL.com is picking for the Minnesota Vikings and different personnel. So Daniel Jeremiah is looking at, and I don't know if you can read that, but Emmanuel Warren. So we have 2 for Warren as a cornerback. And I think it's interesting because that's one of the positions that obviously we need to get better at. So, I think for picking a cornerback at that position, yeah, if the right guy is there, that is definitely a good pick, for us to try to pick up a good cornerback. Now, there's also another cornerback, Brandon Sissy, and I may be pronouncing it wrong, from South Carolina, that could be there. So Toledo is where Warren's from, Emmanuel McNeil Warren.
Warren's a safety. Did we say that?
Sorry, I apologize. He's
Yeah.
a safety, so defensive back. And then Avion Terrell, he was the other cornerback out of Clemson, and we have great luck through Clemson cornerbacks, Andrew Booth. But then the other one that we had was Mansour Delane. And again, picking defensive back, I think, is the most obvious pick. Now, other people have said, hey, Jeremiah Love, but, we're looking at Jeremiah Love could be a top 10 pick. And if that's the case, he's not going to be available for us. Other names that we'd love to have, again, if we didn't go on a 6-game win streak, yeah, Caleb Downs would be in a talking position for us. But the fact of the matter is, he might be a top 10 pick or an early, 11, 12 pick. So Caleb Downs probably isn't going to make it as well to 18. So if you start looking at best player available, we're probably looking at, some of those, the safety, McNeil Warren. We're looking at possible corners that are there, or, maybe we're looking at trade back scenarios. And I know we love hearing that, right? Because that's always worked out great for us, to try to acquire more picks to plug those holes that we have in the secondary. Because with a Harrison Smith, we don't have an official retirement. Even though Aaron Jones might have let it slip that, he's retired at the Super Bowl. But we possibly have 2 safety positions that we got to fill, and we're trying to pick up a corner. And we might have a hole at linebacker. So we definitely have some different holes on defense that we need to fill for starting positions. So early picks in the draft, right now I would lean towards we probably have to pick something on defense. What's your take right now?
Yeah, I would say let's point out that predicting what's going to happen is a crapshoot now that we don't have the pattern of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. We're just winging it to figure out what they will do, which is kind of fun. A lot of unpredictability. Yeah, they do need a cornerback, and they haven't drafted one successfully since Trey Waynes, and we're talking 11 years ago. Yep. Mackenzie Alexander didn't really see a second contract. Mekhi Blackman, Andrew Booth, Chris Boyd, Cameron Dantzler, Caleb Evans, Jeff Gladney, Mike Hughes, and then Kyrie Jackson was killed in a car accident. All of those guys, sadly, did not work out. Mackenzie Alexander was decent, but none of them hit. So I'm convinced that when they draft a cornerback, that guy is going to be good based on sheer probability. Like, it has to even itself out. Kyrie Jackson probably would have been good to break this streak. Rest his soul. I think cornerback is the most obvious need, but then I also wonder, Steve, last year we just didn't give a shit about cornerback in the offseason. Like, all summer we wondered, hey, are they going to get Stephon Gilmore back? And they're like, nah, we got Jeff Okudah and Fabian Moreau. Fabian Moreau actually played pretty well for the Vikings. So if Brian Flores just doesn't really care about cornerbacks, then I don't know it's a foregone conclusion to expect that they're going to draft one. Of course, if Mansour Delane was there, that would be fantastic. But he's also the best cornerback in the draft. I wouldn't expect 17 teams to pass on him. And I would classify Avion Terrell as the front runner right now based on all mock drafts, because it feels like every other mock draft you pull up, he's the guy that goes to the Vikings. Beyond the shadow of a doubt, a defensive back is the foremost need, especially if Harrison Smith retires. But there's just so much unpredictability. Like, will Flores pick the guy? Does Rob Brzezinski pick the guy? Is it Grigson? Like, you don't know who's in charge. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. It feels like we're back to the triangle of authority for Vikings fans who are older than 20 years old. Yep. We did this before. This is not some big new trial. Yeah, Childress too. Like, as soon as the Wilfs came aboard, Rick Spielman was the vice president of, I think, either operations or player personnel. The Wilfs were part of the authority, and then whoever the head coach was, Childress, Frazier. I don't think Spielman got the title until 2013 or 2014 of general manager. Maybe it was a little bit before that. So it feels weird right now, but then it also feels like a return to normalcy. And I will say this in case I forget, I spent the first 3 weeks of the offseason thinking to myself, let's hope they do something to salvage this offseason because Lord knows we need it. Now with the poor drafter out of the way, like there's a little bit more excitement now to have O'Connell in charge of the operation to think, all right, we did something. We knew this wasn't working great. I think there's a little bit more curiosity for me rather than, I don't know, I guess I was just kind of like, I wonder if they could even fix this in the first place. Like, why would they suddenly be different?
Now, we're going to do more of these, and I know that we're on a time constraint here, too. Just real quick, Norrisfia says Thor Nystrom went through Kwesi's draft. He used a point system and said we lost a mid-first-round pick, all in all. Not sure which draft exactly we're talking about, but Bob
He
Sweet
means
says,
all of Kwesi's trades,
cumulatively,
that point
gotcha.
from the trade chart. Mm-hmm.
Bob Swede says, I want a mock. Well, you're in luck. We're about to do one, at least our first 3 rounds with Dustin Baker. I'm going to let him run the show here or make the picks, if you will. I wanted to get to this. Brevman Bain is saying if Metzger falls
Brev, you got
18,
great hair.
He's
you got to keep that great hair.
I wish I had a picture of you right now so people can understand that he's got some longer hair. So him saying that he's going to shave his head, hey, this is on video. So, Brev,
I can even show you how to do it.
Yeah, I will welcome you to be a guest on the show, especially if we draft Mansour. That way we can see that live. David says Fran Foley was a personnel guy in the triangle of authority. Spielman replaced him. All right. Trade Addy. Bob Sweet says trade Addison. And Brevman says, I love my hair, so this is saying something large. I agree. Let's go ahead. Let's jump in. We're going to go ahead and do the mock draft with Dustin Baker. So let's go ahead and just going to shift something here.
If Peter Woods is there, people, I'm taking him. I'm getting that out there now.
All right. So we're going to do just 3 rounds here for the Vikings. And we're going to see who's available. Can you see this well enough? If so, just let me know if you need me to enlarge this for you as well. We're going to do 3 rounds for the Vikings, and we're going to go ahead and enter the draft. We're just going to do a generic one on here. Again, our first pick is 18, so we're picking trade. Now, you can decide if you want to do trades, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to do multiple of these. So this is just our first one that we're doing here on Vikings Playbook with Dustin Baker. So we'll be doing more as we lead up to the draft. So 18, 49, and 82 are your draft picks. And the very first one that we have that we're on the clock, and let me go ahead. I might have to zoom out a little bit for you here so you can see this a little bit better. I wish I could let you take over this part of the screen, but at least who's available that I see that we'd be looking on. Avion Terrell is available. Who you missed out on is Jeremiah Love, who went at pick 15. Mansour Delane went at pick 13, so at least in this mock draft, Brev's hair is safe. Denzel Boston went at pick 17. So who you have available, if we're looking at the secondary, is Avion Terrell is available. I've heard Kenyon Sadiq at tight end. I've heard his name. Casey Conception is out there at wide receiver, who's been a name out there too. Sissy is out there. His rank is 31, but he's also available, and that was a mock to us. And so is McNeil Warren. With those names that I gave you, what would you like to do with round 1? Oh, I think you're on mute, Dustin.
My bad. All right. So with Avion Terrell, I am irrationally spooked by the Clemson connection,
Sure.
even though we joked about it. I don't want to do it. I'm intrigued by Caden McDonald. But I think here on this board, if we operate under the assumption that TJ Hawkinson will be cut or won't be with the team very much longer, on this board, I would take Kenyon Sadiq.
Okay, so Dustin Baker at pick 18 is selecting Kenyon Sadiq, tight end, Oregon. Now we go to pick 49. Some notable players that went off the board: Dylan Thieneman, safety out of Oregon, is now off the board as well. Colton Hood, a cornerback from Tennessee, is off the board. And right before us, LT Overton, an edge from Alabama, was selected. So who is left that is on the board that we may be looking at? Are you looking at a defensive player here?
Yeah, I'm gonna almost certainly, depending on the board in round 3, have a running back. On this board, go down a
Okay.
couple more in case we're forgetting somebody
Yep.
cool.
So you have cornerbacks like D'Angelo Pons from Indiana who may be available. Chris Johnson from San Diego State. If you're looking for a running back, Jadarian Price is available from Notre Dame. So he is available here, but he is mocked somewhere in that 3rd to 4th round as far as his average draft position on most mock draft boards. And then there's also a safety, Kamari Ramsey from USC, that is also available at this position.
On one thing of note here on Vikings territory, I asked yourself and about 11 others what they would, if they could control the Vikings quarterback decision this offseason, like if they were the general manager, and 3 of them had Trinidad Chambliss as they would draft him in addition to like getting Kirk Cousins and keeping McCarthy, just to make sure they get it right. So I'm not going to do that, but I wanted to point out that you're going to see this Chambliss guy. He's not, I think he's going to climb up from pick 67 right now up into higher into the back of first round when folks start to learn a little bit more about him. But on this board, I would consider Connor Lew because the Vikings need a center if Ryan Kelly retires. I would consider Corleone at defensive tackle, but I know we're all in love with Eric Wilson, and rightfully so, but he's 32, and there's always a chance that that was just an outlier year and he's not as great. So on this board, go back to the very top. I would draft off-ball linebacker Deontay Lawson because Wilson's not going to be a long-term solution. We don't know if Ivan Pace is coming back, and Blake Cashman isn't incredibly young. So I think Brian Flores could have a lot of fun with him.
All right.
Jonah
Deontay
Coleman's
Lawson has now been picked in the 2nd round for the Minnesota Vikings by Dustin Baker at pick 49, linebacker out of Alabama. On to your last, we have 2 picks in the 3rd round.
I get that Darnold comp pick. You can't take that away
82
from
and
me.
97. I can't take it away. So
yeah, you don't even have to scroll down here.
Back, yep. Jonah Coleman is staring right at you. That is available right now. Running back out of Washington. He's a Husky. Emmett Johnson is also here as well, who is a name that I've also mentioned that could be a possibility here in round 3.
Yeah, there are, I would say, about 6 draftable running backs that will get us excited. I don't want them to wait until round 7 just to get, some idiot. I want them to get somebody in the first 4 rounds that we can at least split the carry load with Jordan Mason if we assume Aaron Jones is going to be cut, which may or may not happen. Most of my mock drafts, I don't have Jonah Coleman staring me in the face in round 3, so I end up getting Nick Singleton with the Darnold pick. I love Nick Singleton. I think he's going to be great in the NFL, like wink, wink, dynasty fantasy football managers. But on this board, I'm not going to let Jonah Coleman fall, so give me him as hopefully the next Dalvin Cook style running back for the Vikings.
All right. Round 3, pick 82. It's Jonah Coleman, running back out of Washington. On to our last pick in round 3 at pick 97. Dustin Baker, you have just off the board. We lost Justin Jolly, Kamara, and Xavier Scott, cornerback out of Illinois, just went off the board. So what you have here is Jacob Rodriguez. Now, we already took a linebacker, but Jacob Rodriguez was a hot name during the Senior Bowl as well. And just taking a look at it, Will Lee, cornerback out of Texas A&M, Genesis Smith, safety out of Arizona. Some of the notable names.
Yeah, I could have got my Singleton.
Yep. If you're looking at a wide receiver, Dazon Stribling could be a name out there, wide receiver out of Ole Miss, if Addison is traded or not with the team.
Yeah, these are starting to, we get this far down, you're going to defeat the value of the comp pick. Well, go back up. I think on this board, I don't think the Chase, I don't even know how to say his last name. I don't think he plays center.
Santos?
Yeah.
He's a guard.
Yeah, and I think if we're gonna I think we're set, believe it or not. I don't know if I've ever said this. I think we're set an interior offensive line. If we assume Will Fries will play a little bit better this year. I literally have never said that for the Vikings. We're set at guard. Have you ever said that? No.
Yeah. Well,
I
if you're sitting here at this pick, I mean, do you think about, you said yourself, we don't know where we're going to be at with linebacker. Do we double up in best player available and take Jacob Rodriguez here?
Yeah, but then I'm so locked into that paranoia. Like I'm locked into the paranoia that that guy just wouldn't play very much because you have Blake Cashman, Eric Wilson, and Deontay Lawson.
Maybe Eric
And
Wilson.
yeah, and yeah, that's a good point. We'll already know by the draft if he's back too.
Correct.
And I don't want another Ty Felton in the third round who we just don't even use. So on this board, I would probably take Deshaun Barham there, an edge rusher. I love the adage you can never have too many edge rushers, and I'd roll with it there.
All right. So that is your top 3 rounds from Dustin Baker. And again, this is
look at my terrible grades
that we'll be doing. So Kenyon Sadiq was his first pick at 18.
We're not going to regret that
D+. But I think a lot of that is based on the current roster and needs. That's also basing that TJ Hawkinson is still on this roster. Deontay Lawson at 49 in round 2 gets you a B, linebacker out of Alabama. Round 3, 82, Jonah Coleman gets you an A-, running back out of Washington. And then in round 3 at 97, Jeshaun Barham out of Michigan, an edge, gets you a C+ for an overall draft grade of B-. So again, there's many of these that we're going to be doing, and I'm sure this would be a lot easier if Dustin was controlling this. That way he could. We'll have to do that for next time. That way you can kind of control a little bit better of your picks. But yeah, definitely think that we're going to be doing a lot of these, and it'll be interesting to see because free agency period tampering starts 9 through 11 March, and then free agency opens March 11th. So well before the April draft. So like Dustin said, we'll have a better idea with where we're going here as we get a little bit closer. All right.
The thing that I like the most, the idea that I like the most about Sadiq, if he falls to 18 and the Vikings don't have Hawkinson, is he can be productive enough as a pass catcher that the way the Vikings usually play, where they're not really featuring a WR3 like to the utmost, Sadiq could just be that. Just like Hawkinson was when he first got here and Cousins was targeting him like a fiend. For some reason, we whether it's Mike Zimmer or Kevin O'Connell, we never really empower a WR3 to get 600, 700, 800 yards. We throw parades when Jalen Naylor has 450 yards and 6 touchdowns. So I think if we're just not going to do that, just like we don't really run the ball at a normal clip, then you can get Sadiq to be a target hog, at his purest form. It might take a year to get cooking, but you get it. And then that's the other thing I wanted to say, and I'll probably say it on your show until it ever comes true, is the only way that Kevin O'Connell is going to survive as the Vikings head coach and prosper is if he runs the ball at an average clip. Like we were watching that game against the Seahawks, that huge blunder of a game. The Vikings were down 3-0 after a huge mistake, and they just came out and just kept passing. They just wouldn't run the football. You had like mind-bogglingly bad quarterback play, and we had already given up on the run. You cannot do that ever, and you can't do that when you have like the worst quarterback in football for that week, Max Brosmer. So hopefully with Frank Smith as the assistant head coach, who comes from the Dolphins and Devon Achane, like hopefully somebody tells O'Connell, run the ball, even if you don't like doing it. That's the only way he's going to keep going as the Vikings head coach. Like, and this isn't like this huge thing that we want to try. Like, just be normal. My adage is like, take the soup out of the can, pour it in a bowl, and put it in the microwave. That's all we're asking you to do. Run the football on offense. And until the Vikings do that at above average clip, I think we're kind of doomed on offense.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, hopefully we have a little bit better upside with whoever's at quarterback, whether it's JJ McCarthy or whoever the Vikings end up bringing in off of free agency. We'll kind of see what the Vikings do. We'll be doing more draft picks and more updates as we get closer to free agency in the draft. So make sure that you're tuning in with us every week. And next week, we most likely are doing a Sunday, February 15th show because that Saturday is Valentine's Day and I got a day with my wife.
So do I. Not your wife.
Yeah, Dustin, hey,
My
thanks for
wife.
joining us. If you guys haven't already, make sure that you're following Dustin Baker, also X Viking Territory to follow Vikings Territory, and check out vikingsterritory.com as well too. They got a lot of good updates on there all the time. Make sure that you check them out and all the work that Dustin is doing and writing and editing over at Vikings Territory. So Dustin, thank you so much for joining the show, and to our followers, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure that you go and subscribe if you haven't already on our YouTube. That is at Vikes Playbook on YouTube, and then it's Vikings Playbook on X. And make sure that you follow us Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as well. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Dustin Baker. One last word that you have for our viewers.
I'd like to come back on and chat with you maybe right before free agency, because believe it or
Sure.
not, folks, that's 4 weeks away. Like, that's how close, and that's really the opening party of the offseason, because you get to see how the roster is going to look different. Going to have to hope the Vikings make a bunch of moves beforehand just to have some spending money. But yeah, free agency's 4 weeks away, and let's do this again before then, okay?
Absolutely. We'll get something scheduled and on the books. And thank you so much for Vikings Playbook. I just want to thank everyone else out there, and SKOL Vikings. We'll talk to you next week. See you guys. Have a good night.